はい、ちょっとビルドバーグのね、公式サイト見てるんだけど、ちょっと、なんで日本の広告、電通と箱で以外に調べてるの知ってますよ。いや、そうピーター知ってますよ。なんか、見て出演できてないよ。ちょっと、協力します。ちょっと、わかりました。ユナイテッドネーションからなんか通常来てませんか？なんか制裁かけられてなんか通常来てませんか？はい、日本音楽事業者協会に英文で届きませんでか？すいませんが多分制裁名簿入っていったと思います。それ翻訳化したんでしょ多分。それで分かりました。じゃあ残念な辻も制裁対象やった。原因分かれないけど制裁対象になりました。滋賀県は問題も制裁対象になりました。はい、もうね、水沢文お前も制裁食らってるの知ってるじゃん。制裁食らってるし、知ってますよ。制裁食らってたんや。やっぱりな。青鬼プロダクションとは送られてたはずやん。マネキョはちょっと問題って。小笠一、お前、辞任せ。渡辺副社の渡辺さ。あと、田辺エージェンシーの田辺。お前も辞任せ。お前ら、恩師教の議長席、狙ってるの知ってるぞ。お前狙ってるの知ってるぞ、本当に。分かった、狙われてるし、青森かね。ぶっ潰せてじゃなくてさ、やっぱり別に。やっぱり福島県か、あいつらか、福島。問題だ、福島。とんでもないこと、問題発覚や。問題発覚じゃないか。7軍でも出られて、本当にびっくりした、本当に。笑い事じゃないって言ってんよ、俺も。びっくりした、本当に。調べたら MS 海洋祭に見ましたね。MS ミュージックフェルシャン。いいんじゃないか。だって27時間じゃないかな。もう。エイヤーさん最初からね、勝力さんのお弟子さんやから。勝力からね、お弟子さんだよ。いや、渡辺ですね、終わった。あいつ、この名称のカバンみたいだった。この名称さん。そう、いこうさん。そう、もう、兄貴だったの。いとこですね。びっくりした。逆に言うと、血縁長ね。もう決別したいと。みんなね。やっぱ、辰巳屋か。また。そう、知ってたでもうびっくりした、本当に。そう、両も。逆に言うと、こっそり言ってたよ。活動してるやん。俺休んでるよ。こっそり活動してるって言ったよ。すいません。実は、もう一人見るじゃん。から見て。今ね、そうのいいし。はい。やっぱりな、AVC、業界分裂したのびっくりした。今、新宿で激戦してた。びっくりした。びっくりした。エストーニアか。やっぱりソビエト諸国でやってた。やっぱザグレブでやってるからな。これベオグラード会合にベオグラード会合にね。初めてやったね。セルヤの。グレナビッチ首相やっていきましたね。残念だけどね、私もね、スオピーの方を言うべき竹内たち言ってんだけど、こういうでっかい首相あれやないところじゃすまんけど、ちょっと金属探知機留置場並みに厳しく俺から確認してからほんで逆に言うと田中のお坊さんね、後半でやってあれが良かった。逆に良かったんですよ。衛生は大丈夫。もうね、各国の軍事関係者抑えてるから大丈夫。抑えてるから、日本の気象庁も抑えてるから大丈夫やんで。もう抑えてるから、これの面で大丈夫やんで。そんな面で盗み聞きされんのに。逆に言うとカメラね、こんな音声付きないやんさ。今JR 東日本なんか防犯カメラの設置強化してる。前ばっかあったわ、新幹線にもさ。あれは2017年さあったやろ。なんか新幹線占領事件あれびっくりした。本当にびっくりした。本当に笑い声びっくりした。本当にびっく くりした本当に。今回福島興味なんで車見張ってこいってさあサイバーテロやってないからさあ運転手にやったら絶対あれはね交通事故の実は佐久間でした佐久間さんでしたレイでしたサムの元のライバルガンマンの最後やいやねえどっちがいいかなだから外国人でしたオランダ系かなドイツ系でしたさボイトかけ混乱したんやさでもサムとアンジーは逆に言うとさ自由奔放やからね自由ないね多分アメリカ本土も危ないって言うからだからやしびっくりしたなんかおかしいなと思ったらさマークだからなんで急にね多めに言ってるかびっくりしたヨーロッパ笑うことびっくりした本当にやっぱびっくりした本当に何が起こってるかなと思ったらこのビルダーバーグのサイトなぜか強いんだねそれ私も調べてなんで強いんかなと思ってこれ見せると結構なんで日本の広告規制かけてるそんなわけあるか逆にもっとスポンサー増やせてさなめてこうやって出してる3局の YouTube の挑戦よくビラバーグビラバーグスの YouTube ねビラバーグス YouTube の YouTube ね本当はビルベルバーグって言うんだけどビルベルバーグこれはねオランダ語に言っとけ英語みたいなあれに省き石器これビルベルバーグYouTube なんでねモニター今日ね今のお前ら下っ端変えないってことね不安になる下っ端ですね下っ端モニター今日おかしいと思ったよいや立ち位置高しねなんでスタークルとか作ったのこっちも3曲クーデータ行き始めたよもう3曲クーデータ言って3曲クーデータおかしいと思って3曲クーデータなんかフリーのコメントあるよなんで概要で言ったよさなんか海洋びっくりした何海洋3曲クーデータ3曲のね要求みたいなどんな感じで思ったよ大体もう知ってたからもう公式サイト閉鎖時点でもう公式サイト大サリバン大サリバン担当やろ青網委員会の本部メンツが担当してるやんそれは何年間3曲は終わり田中明彦もう下っ端がほっとけてくる下っ端がほっとけてくるほっとけどこに私は今古賀誠一お前は辞任せえお前辞任せえ本当に無事辞任せえいや見らんねえからもうほっといていいよほっとけ相手してみたいなお前制裁対象がはい辞任せえ辞任せえって言ってん辞任せえって言ってん辞任せえって言ってんこれ以上するとけどだいぶ悪化するからやめろって言ってん悪化するすごいコンピューター知ってました知ってましたもちろんねびっくりだ知ってたよ笑い事じゃんもういや声優資本が介入したんやもう介入してたら俺らなんかもう全然中止だもう介入し始めたもんでしたいやまだあんねんあれも一足やったんでびっくりしたな同じやってんこうするまあ残念だけどね3曲くれたりして何上嘘っぱいじゃんどうしたびっくりした急に閉鎖したもう笑いことじゃねえよ本当に 田中信さんはヤンシュお二人がCEO ですさあビラバウズHQ の CEO です。一応ね、ビラバウズのね、構成 CEO 兼務して、共同の CEO 兼務して、それを俺たちこんなに言っとけばね、私もね、知らねえ。さあ、びっくりした会話見てびっくりやんない。さあ、多分田中明子辞任要求の議論してね、多分議論してね、多分あんなに会合やったの、多分物分かり終わってん、決裂して。残念だけどね、あれ、やらせて、やらせてやってたよ。新しい組織でも作ろうかって検討した。西ワールドの JI 参考にしたさ、エイプマンのビルドバーグ作ろうかなさ、アジア、インド、太平洋の連絡協議会作ろうかな。俺の作ろうかなと思ったらね。検討しちゃうよな。検討しちゃうよな、これ。もう、田中明子、ほっとけ。あいつのせいで、第2の安保クーデターだからさ、永田クーデター、こっちまでびっくりした。びっくりした体系。泳ぎ団体のいるから見なかったよ。びっくりしたな。やっぱ金雇われた連中が金やん。金やまと連中。残念だけど、水上がなんかお前ら鵜呑みしすぎ。残念だけどね。鵜呑みしないで。俺も初めて言った。その326はね、この日にビルダーバーグをやってました。予告込めてやりました。やっちまってんねんね。終了。4月9日にやってた。そう、知らせたんびっくりしたのか。むっちゃ長期間やってたよ。別の場合。なんでや藤波愛ちゃんも俺も知らない。知らない。本当にどうなんだ知らんがね。こういう純作。そう。俺も本当に知らんねん。笑うね。生徒ちゃんみたいな。じゃあ、本当にマジで分からんねん。本当に分からんねん。びっくりした。三局の会合ですね。クーデター。会合やってびっくりした。本当に。見たが日本語版どうなってるかな。両方もね、残念ながら失格しました。はい、やめさせられない。やっぱり卑弥呼か。やっぱり卑弥呼やった。こいつ卑弥呼。笑え。卑弥呼ってどういうことや、本当に。滅んだんじゃないかってそう思ったらさ、宮内庁のじゃあなんでこんな決勝
of lifelong learning. I believe that because as we train the new generations of in the workforce, we know that we need to create materials that are a lot more engaging, that are a lot more useful, and that are going to have an impact in the way that they learn and in the way that they acquire the new skills that they need in order to remain competitive in the marketplace. What a better way to do that than through video games? As children, we learn through playing, and we believe that through gamification and through game-based learning, we can make learning fun again, not only for children, which we know is the best way to learn, but also from adults. If they play these video games, they will become more engaged, as I said earlier, they would also acquire that knowledge much more deeply, and they will be able to apply that knowledge in their daily jobs. And finally, by doing the video games through the simulators, they will be able to have experiential learning to get the feedback on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and learn from that.
あとは安心にバートのね、そう中南米系びっくりだしバルセやでな。
Very clearly, I think the world is moving towards secular economy. It's a necessity. When you look at water scarcity, when you look at waste pollution, everybody is now aware of that. If we want to make a conciliation between the planet for our children and economic development, we need to move towards a secular economy.
なんか日本語っぽいね。
By
あ、びっくりしたこれ。
education,
今年探した。
by different ways
あ
of
ー、びっくりした。
both for citizens and also by companies, we will make
び
this
っくりした本当
move
に。
help us collectively to
あー、
have
びっくりした本当に。
great again. Thank you.
Thank you。あ、こっちはいいじゃないね。ちゃんと遊ぶに。あれはね、ちゃんと変化してる。俺も。Thank you って言ってんやね。Thank you。Thank you。うん。Thank you。Thank you。Thank you。ビロヤバイブスをね。エグゼクティブ。言ったけど俺、幹部だと思ったら面白いね。あ、ダメや、俺は。態度取れんねん。そんなもんや。エコってこれ、能登さんのことはあれ、能登さん誰と入籍したんでしょうね。俺と俺、もたいしたくんだったからね。あー、びっくりした、本当に。まさか削除されてると思った。こんな子かなと思ったら、誰や、削除した。まあ、この通り。ああ、びっくりしたさ。これ、私、去年、バルバロスの、バルベル、12月1日で独立したね、共和国になったね。いや、いいわけね。
And again, all of this is happening on a global scale, which is really enabled by digital technology.
いやね、ベル。そうだね、一応、おじきに大王子とね。女性王子のね、遺族たちが言ったのね。自分たちで作れって言って。自分たちで作れって言って。俺から報告に来いって言って。認めるでしょ。無理やったのよ。ああ、それがね。あいつ、森田明夫、ビルダーが叩いてたよ。めちゃくちゃ。びっくりした、本当に。何や、俺、やらせおかしいって言って。俺は産業にか。なんで JI で全く関与してない。全く関与してないからね。もう一人の安保闘争の手腕をしてるわ。何や、吉田茂やって。森田明夫やって、こいつやったから。こだめをしようって言うよ。森田やった。あいつか、森田資金流してたから。森田資金か。やっぱり警察の腐ってたから。七夕革命でやっちまった。七夕革命やっちまったよ。さあ、分裂設定にしたさあ、こういう設定やった。びっくりした。残念な前回とは違ってみんな断るの。みんな金でなくさ、みんな動いたさ、みんな動いたよさ。戦おうって言って。
I think it is the biggest threat is that we lose competitiveness. And that is for me the whole part. Because if we want to be leaders in innovation, we should also
There's two aspects. First, you must have a great idea, but you must be the first. So that means speed. And we must make sure that I think we have an ability to be innovative and to be the first and to have speed. So for me, that is the biggest threat of cybersecurity, to get slowed down.
いやさ知ってましたよ。残念ながらこれが敵の分析でビルダーバーググループが最強ってさあアライアンスはいいんや元からこれでいいんやグループは元からねさ同盟とかそう言うやろ三菱グループとか要はあれでしょ皆さん KDI グループとかさこれと同じやってさグループねこれでよかったよミーティングこうしていいのサミットでもいいのねこれは削除これ大事なもんやから当たり前やんこれをレッティンガーね当たり前やんアンジェリーナ嬢さレッティンガー家の影でしたああびっくりしたね本当にこうやって書いてたんよそした話もようわからなかったね最大の勢力だったね闇の国よう言ってたね本見てびっくりやんあこうやってやってたあはははごめんボルカこんなもんよなこうやって細かく説明してたね短編もないけどね俺もビルダーバーグズチャタムズビルダーバーグチャタムズねルーズ元であんまり教えられない
maintaining a consistent pressure on Russia to begin to negotiate seriously about ending its occupation of eastern Ukraine. Unfortunately, I think now the impeachment dynamics in the U.S. have really knocked U.S. policy off the table. We don't have the engagement, we don't have the same focus, and as a result, I think that takes a lot of pressure off of Russia to negotiate. I'm hopeful that as we
毎年開催する俺報告してたね私も
possibly on
いやここが今はね第2のビルダーバーこっちも第2のビルダーバーこっちが担当して今本部的な機能さあ本部的なハルバーシュタットそしてねマリジョセドロインクラビー2人とも素晴らしいねブラックベリー結成をブラックベリーしたねびっくりしたビルダーびっくりしたよこちら私が結成かまれるチャタムが関与してたチャタム応援支援
I would say it's a very important issue. Why? Because in Russia, political competition is limited. There are no real opposition parties. So the society stands up to the autocratic regime through organizing itself, through building trust, through providing public goods that a corrupt and inefficient state cannot provide. And it's not just
アメリカ本土に何かおかしいなと思った今回さ司祭が怒った偶然じゃないさ何か起こってるしってデイビッドさん
fighting domestic violence, promoting gender equality, defending minorities. So this is actually where the European future for Russia is. And luckily, with the new communication technology, with internet, it's easier to organize itself, it's easier to inform itself, and it's easier to promote change, creating new Russia that eventually will become part of greater Europe.
さあ、私の人気だし、さあ、なんで多いんださあ、福円と似てるってびっくりしたさあ、やっぱりな、びっくりした本当にさあ、本当にこんなんしもたよ、俺マスカ似てるびっくりしたびっくりした本当にすまんね、本人見させてもらえた本当に YouTube で見ましたびっくりした本当にで、どうちゃん行ったんさクエンとあれだってバカだって離れてよかったねさあ、瀬戸ちゃんがさギャラクシー見ましたささあ、久しぶりだな島君
security policy.
面白いの作るびっくりした。
What can we expect
だから
from Russia? We know that
最新じゃないですか。
Putin is actually more popular than most of his competitors.
ベースの目線負け
But
に。
will
びっくりだな。解説してよかった
Medvedev
みん
be
な。
a leader than Putin? In short, can we expect a different kind of trajectory from Russia in the coming years?
いや、岸のですけど、直径で井上家ね。井上まで。
Russia is focusing more on
これで、
digitalization
み
than
つちゃん
what
ことね。
some might call
いや、青
modernization.
だ。みつさ
As
ん。
always, the views on Russia are divergent.
今、青田七海でしょ。どういう。なんだったんでしょ。ダメでー。
Liberal democracy can survive the current period of disruption, but it's going to have to change
やっぱりな。
the volatility
そう。
and
やばい。このビルダー
the
は
risks that we are witnessing across much of the Western world are anchored in some very deep changes that have been swirling beneath our democracies that have been coming for many years and still have a long way
あえて
to
最初の
run.
時に言って
They relate
ビルダーバー
to
グでな。なんかいろんな議題してるけど、
strong
これ
feelings
言っ
of
てあげる。
distrust in the political system, widespread fears over
な
the
のに、その
perceived
際言えんの。
destruction of ways of life,
安全に
national
そういうの。
identity,
言えんだよ。はっきり言うや。
big worries
海
over
外内外だろ言えんだよ、本当に。
deprivation, the way in which the economic settlement is
一部で。
playing out,
上井さんね。
and weakening bonds between the
久保
mainstream
一家の
parties.
松江とも言う。久保一家のね、遺族の青に
Those
竹
four
内って
currents
いうよね。
have been with us for a very
俺
long
は当時
time. Before the Great
そういう
Recession,
面接しかもう
before
話せ
the
ない。
arrival of Facebook and Twitter and Big
絶対
Tech,
帰っても公害じゃな
but
い。
they are
も
now
う絶対今
producing very
公害。
substantive political
い
effects.
や、
And
滝
they
沢秀明さんが今ね、ジュリーさん亡くなってもらった。
substantive political effects. The
20
liberal
年の会長
democracy has to
なってる
change.
の。
It has to make its political systems more representative. It has to ensure that people feel that their nations and communities are secure and have strong and robust external borders. And it also, over the long term, needs to devise an economic settlement that ensures that everybody feels that they are relatively getting the gains and the benefits that other groups in society are getting as well. Very big
俺
challenges.
も分からんね。なんで
No clear answer.
電通そんなのいいやろ。逆に言うともっと出してくれて
The
さ、
world
もう
is
ま
very
あ
much in liberal democracy's
出して
core.
くれてぐらいね。もう歓迎してるからね。もうやめて必要やからな。そうか。言っとけよ。しゃべんぞ。はい、ベロしゃべんで本当に。しゃべれんで本当に。くださいよ。
So bringing trilateral to Slovenia means also bringing Slovenia to trilateral. And as you know, David Rockefeller Fellows had a pre-program. It is our pleasure that we connected them at the MCHM breakfast with Slovenian business society. They were talking about the global issues and how connected the world is with some local representatives and even some members of trilateral. It is also our pleasure that the
これはいいや。
former
これはいいんや
Prime
けど。
Minister, who is the current Minister for Foreign
間
Affairs,
違えたら削除してもいい。
had the time to meet with them and discuss
特
where
に
the
あ
Europe
の
is
18
today and
さ
where
あ、
the
そ
Euro
の
is
サバ
today.
がいさあ、俺に言
And
う
of course, we have
厳
finished
しくな
our
る。
program
厳しかった。
with amazing
お前が命令したん
fun
かって。
with Professor Dan Azov.
かってさ、言ったよ。言ったよ。冗談だよ。俺も言ったからな、本当に。くさ。来年前がビルダーバーグ特集してたん
Democracy
で。
will not survive in an unchanged form.
田舎終わっちゃい
It has not been changing enough to accommodate the fast, speedy development of the internet,
ああ、びっくりした。
and
ああ、これか。
too much, even the rather static nature
あ
of men.
あ、ああ、こんばん。ああ。
Do you have a crystal ball? I wear a
まあこんな話もだ。逆にサムはね、司忍ぶよ。弁護士あげたい。ああ、逆に言うけど。 あんたらサイバーやってるあったんじゃないか。もう言ってもないよ。あんたらやったんじゃないか。言っちまったんやこれがさ。お前らはやったんじゃないかさ。言ってもないよ。さあ、奈良君のサイトがあの人やろ。自分たちがやったんじゃないかって言ったよ。さあ、あなたのサイトがあの人なんじゃないかさ。警察の一部にもいるんで。大体魔法を信じてるからそんなもん信じるわけないやん。もう言ってもね、CBRL 兵器の一部だそう兵器のな一つたるねそうなんて言ったさあマーズとかサーズとかコロナとかこれは言ったんこれは信じてるこれは言ったんや信じるか証拠を見せろって言った例えばドラえもんのび太の魔界大冒険みたいなそうなんか浮かばせるとか例えばこのおしぼりをこういう状態で浮かばせるとかそういうの見せてくれ、ね、北天候線ミスターマリックみたいなああいうユリ・ゲラーさんみたいなああいうの見せてくれんの、ね、北天候さんなんかこんなんしたいのさ近いのもあるからねただびっくりしたよ来たアメリカにびっくりした本当になんか事情があったよなさやっぱ児玉一家か児玉の連中か左右合作児玉かやっぱり東京23区現に大阪のサイバーテロ事件あれびっくりした本当にびっくりした本当にまだ3極クーデターやってた3極クーデター逆に言うとねもうこのチャタムもいいんやけど逆にこれビルダーバーグのサイト見せたわよビルダーバーグのサイト見せたわよ新しい制度 RS 名にねなんで強いかなと思ったのJO 佐々木理事長調べてるの知ってるねなんで強いかさあやっぱり来てたからやっぱりなっちゃうそうなんで強いかなちなみになんか借金の通帳来た普通こういうのはねメールじゃなくて普通はね紙で来るわさただあれ俺さやったさ2016年の時に妨害起こったからねさ今来るかねこんな時いやでねしてしまって本当にやっぱりとかやっぱり長浜が危なかったからさ危なかった来るかなと思った多分無理やと思うな多分邪魔したらあかんから逮捕されるか逆にさおいジェンさんどうでもいいよ脅迫に行かんのよ当たり前今日当たり前よ本当に何のことだと思ったびっくりしたヒデさんがまさか生きてたびっくりした本当にやっぱブライブルみたいによし知ってましたよさこっそり生き延びてたびっくりした本当になんか明野さんにそっくりやったびっくりした逆に言うとね松本よかったいや政治人がさやっぱり進出したじゃないやっぱ介入したじゃないと思うやっぱり本日今日分裂したからやっぱりなだからってことなんだねびっくりした本当に最近出始めて見てびっくりやっぱ講談社商品転売先あれはびっくりした俺架空でな新山大津にやっちまったよぶっ放してまったよ やっちまった。総理参加のね、レンタルショップの関係、もうちょい避難させて、時短営業と休業要請書、これで避難させて、ちょっとあんまり知らせるとダメやったんでね。俺は7君でした。こっそり読んでましたさ。たまたま新山。講談社の件を聞いてびっくり。やろうって言ったよ。こっそり閣議決定したよ、少数の閣議。決定したよ。全会一致じゃん、少数。やったよ、これでね。戦うって言ったよ。タイテロセス。この代わり、新山。まあね、もう、知名度はね、3番目の首都にしようって言った。東洋地域ね、結構なんね。逆にとこの理解な、松山が新山の区間ね、電車、在来線特急区間、沿線化できんかな思った。それじゃないと、四国新幹線も作れんのったら、長山の時。ね、いや、新山鍵やと思った。新山鍵やと思った。俺思ったね。新山びっくりな、2つ駅。別の在来線。乗れて、びっくりだな。でよかった。住みやすい土地やった。公安施設あれびっくりした。7君。あれびっくりした。やっぱ脅されたからね。脅されたからやっぱ。思ったの看板、滋賀県と新潟の。やっぱり、栃木か。もう。井上前の出身は茨城でしょ。茨城やったやつ。安藤。青田の正面でしょ。青田の正面。ね、もう一人じゃん。しっかりして。井上県で言ってたよ。
large amounts of talent so that companies can be scaled up very quickly. For example, in my own experience, I started working with Bilderbergs when there was less than 200 of us. 3 years later, there is a few thousand of us. And company culture was lost and the new people got hired. And then I think the last thing is that universities as well as kind of companies less on protecting their IP and really trying to move as fast as possible. Because if you think about it, innovation is about
あれはびっくりした。あれはびっくりした。もう本当にびっくりした。
kind of picking holes and figuring out how to do the next step.
よかったねさ。びっくりしました。
Running and iterating fast. And if we run and iterate fast, then the success will be there and kind of the little details don't matter that much. And I think this is important from the viewpoint of university lending the research to the public domain and really benefit the environments in which the university's professors operate, as well as in terms of companies sharing the information and flow with each other. So there is, for example, a lot of different seminars, people from one company visiting the other company, sharing quite openly actually what they are doing, writing academic papers, again talking about their latest solutions. So that we are all up to date and the entire system kind of help each other in terms of making the most innovation and the most progress in a short amount of time. Because I think the question is not can we innovate, but the question is, or can we invent something? But the question about innovation is, can we be the first ones to do something? So it's as much about the speed as it is about the success.
取材に応じてもらわないでびっくりだね本当に。
We had a really good discussion
びっくりした。
today.
虎のもんねすごいわ。
What we really want.
タイ
The
ガー
next
ゲー
year
ツ。
will be the election for the European Union, for the Parliament of the European Union, and it is really important
上
that
坂さ
there
んに触
will
れて
be
る
a strong
むっちゃ
mandate.
元気。
One of the challenges we are facing at the moment is still the migration crisis, and also the priority of the Austrian
俺でも顔変
presidency
や
is
ん。
security
みんな
and
気づい
fight
たさ。
against illegal migration. So we had a good discussion today on all these topics, and of course there are different opinions on this. But in general, we are always on the same line. We want to have a solution for the European Union and for Europe. Safe external borders and legal migration, because Europe will need it in the end. But people still have in front of their eyes the migration flood in 2015, and therefore it is really important to good solution and a solution which will be implemented in all the countries of the European Union to have a resilient European asylum system.
いや、ジェイコブか。ジェイコブ協会さすが。ジェイコブちゃう。巨頭がなくなったね。今、ジェイドの出た。ジェイの世界。
Migration is currently one of the key issues of European citizens, and my view is that it will remain so, especially because migration is here to stay, and it will probably increase in numbers and complexity because of the political consequences of wars, the terrorism, but also because of the climate change.
ジェイさんの影で
I
す。
think, in my view, migration is needed in Europe. I think it's something that we can benefit from, and I think that we need to change the
あい
narrative.
たさ、聞いときにさ、思い出したさ、こう。ああ、そうそう、見て、びっくりしたさ。
Of Europe
びっくり
says
した、
that
もう。
migration is something that we
ベンホールとも捜査受けたよ。知ってるから、もう知ってましたよ。も
and
う。
grow our economic
見たことある。
development, the quality of life.
じゃあ、福田代表さんも捜査受けたよ。さ、
Also go back
や
to
げ
the
ん。
European
核兵弁護のため
values
に。ちょっと、
and human values
捜査協力したい。
that are, I think, the foundation
あ、もうあれも言って、
of
さ、
Europe, so that together we
小
can
泉
change,
純一郎
as
さ
I
んとかね、
said,
小
the
沢一郎さん
narrative
のあの関係
and
をね、
help
あ
these
ー、
people, but
もう知ってま
also
したよ、
help
スマイル。
ourselves
大変
grow and
びっ
develop.
くりしたな。よっかもたでした。本当にね。要は。
Turkey belongs to European family, you know. There is no way that Turkey can distance itself from the realities of Europe. Today, of course, at the Trilateral Commission, we are going to discuss three scenarios: confrontation, cooperation, and membership of Turkey to the EU. In these three scenarios, of course, there are different outcomes. But I would say that confrontation between Turkey and the EU is a complete lose-lose scenario. And if it is
まさかクレジット、
instead of
お前ら
Turkey to the EU,
あ
it
い
will
つ
be
な
some sort of limited cooperation, and
ここに
it
聞いて
will
ん
be
の笑い
a scenario in which both Turkey and the EU will not be able to enjoy the full potential.
逆にした
In economics, we say, you know, this is not cost effective at all. But when it comes to EU membership, I would say that this will mean full use of potential of Turkey and the EU together. This means a stronger, stable, respected, fully democratic Turkey, but this also means in the world scene a global actor of EU, peace-bringing EU, welfare-creating EU, employment-creating EU. So I would say that in this case, membership case, the outcome would be win-win-win. So win for Turkey, win for the EU, but also win for beyond.
ダーク、まああれだけどね。
You will have to define what you mean by Europe and the European Union having its own army. I do not think Europe needs its own army for what I would qualify as the classical Article 5 NATO scenario. In other words, in a conflict with Russia. But Europe should definitely, the European Union should definitely develop the possibility to project hard power without the United States of America. I can imagine a scenario in Northern Africa where you have a combination of terrorism, climate change, migration. It's
そういえば
an
みんな
ungoverned
で
part
テ
of
ロリズム
Africa
にハマってる
largely.
だ
Where both
Ah,
Al-Qaeda
so-
meets Daesh.
そう
In
そう
other words,
これ
it's not
これ
impossible.
何を言った
Look
あ
at
今
the French and what they did.
そうこれ何を言ったよ
You would need to intervene militarily, and then the European Union would be on its own.
はいもう
Second scenario, virtual but not impossible, when in the Balkans the demons of the past
びっ
would
くり
raise
した本当に何を言ったんやそれ
repeat the situation like we had in the 90s of the previous century, where finally Bill
Century,
Clinton and the
right.
United
Sure,
States
sure,
of America had to come in to stabilize the situation. I could think about about the need for border protection, external border protection, with military means. You're a bit on the border here between the military and the military police, the gendarmerie in French. In other words, if that is meant by President Macron and Chancellor Merkel with the European army, I can follow them. What we should not forget, by the way, is when you talk about European military intervention, that's why I like European army not much, is that there will always be national parliaments who will decide if those soldiers will be sent into harm's way. So they will not, I hope, talk about a European Parliament which decides this goes to the heart of the sovereignty of nations, and those nations will want to decide themselves. I see the way out, as presented by President Macron of France, the European Intervention Initiative, where you can build coalitions of the willing outside the EU institutions. You can build coalitions of the willing, which you will always need for such kind of military operations. Advantage of a coalition of the willing is that after Brexit, you can keep Great Britain on board, because they will not anymore be a member of the European Union. At the same time, PESCO, the Permanent Structured Cooperation, should of course continue, important project, but rather bureaucratic and rather cumbersome. So that would be my answer to the question, does Europe need its own army? Developments in these last few years are showing us that the strength of the EU relative to individual countries is not constant over time. I believe we can say that the EU is strongest towards candidate countries when a country wishes to accede to the European Union or to the Eurozone. It tends to follow the suggestions and the prescriptions of the EU as much as possible to make progress. And that is the moment when the magnet effect of European integration is really great. And by the way, has used countries in the past, if we think of the Balkans, for example, also to establishing better relations among each other in order to qualify for membership of the EU. Then the problem is that sometimes relatively
急に顔出してさびっくりした
EU
急に
is
顔出してさ
not
俺が
so strong in terms of leading them to respect its own rules as pro-Europeans would like to see. And we can even see in recent years, for example, a greater leniency in terms of allowing infringements of the Stability and Growth Pact. But then the most recent experience is how difficult it is for a country to leave the European Union if it so decides. And the monumental example of Brexit shows us that vis-à-vis a member state which wants to leave the European Union still has quite a remarkable power. We have seen in the case of the negotiations on Brexit the EU displaying really unexpected unity among the 27, also thanks to the skills and determination of Chief Negotiator Michel Barnier. And we are seeing how difficult it is for the UK to get its act together. And this, in my view, should be also kept in mind by countries here and there where governments play with the idea of perhaps leaving one day the EU or the Eurozone. They better keep in mind that it is tremendously difficult. If it has been the experience, the administration of the quality of the UK. I don't want to imagine other specific examples of countries where the politicians sometimes say, let's get rid of the EU. Not only I have no idea where those countries would end up, but also they would suffer very, very much in the process.
Does the European Union need its own army? Well, here's what I think. The vision of a European army is actually a useful vision because it is good to know what the long-term goal might be. But is the European army something we can put together right now? No. And why not? First and foremost, because the European Union does not even have the mechanism to come up with clear political decisions and to speak with one voice in crisis. So the first step which we in the European Union need to take together is to change our decision-making process. We need to go from consensus to qualified majority voting. We need to learn that all of us, whether we are 27 or 28, will only be listened to, will only be respected, and can only be a military actor in the world if we speak with one voice. And that requires majority voting. So that's step number one. And the next steps are capabilities, and we will need to work on that also. And then we can think
When one thinks about the 2015 migration crisis, it is true that we have gone a long way as a European continent. And we've gone a long way because in 2015 we were hit with a massive crisis. Hundreds of thousands of migrants coming to Europe's shores. And that is not the case anymore. It is true that the overall numbers have decreased. But is that enough? Is it enough to just look at the overall numbers? Or should one also focus on what's happening within each EU? And I say that because there are certain EU countries, such as Greece, such as Italy, such as Spain, which have taken far greater hits than others when it comes to migration. And yes, numbers will go down, but problems do persist in countries like the ones I just mentioned. So the question one needs to ask is, has Europe done enough in order to alleviate the effects of the crisis throughout the entire EU 20? Has Europe done enough in order to share burdens? And I say that particularly because when one looks at the figures regarding relocation of refugees across Europe, then one will realize that not enough has been done in that direction. And so one is led to the question, what kind of Europe do we want? Do we want a Europe where we will share the benefits of Europe? Or do we also want a Europe where the countries also share burdens?
見てるからね。わかった、やってみよう。おまけやった。そう、びっくりした。おまけやった。そう。おまけですよ。あ、びっくりした。そう、おまけ。すごいね。こっそりね、おまけやるじゃない。さあ、永住どうかしら。一つ聞きたいね。証拠はそっちか。違うやろ、他に。おしゃれ、無数に向けんか。お前ら。いやー、貴重的に。テルマさんって、もみたいにテルマさん言ったら無理です。ああ。 ムスリム教会代表して言ってんああ無理だって言ってん
people over the course of that.
ねそうでしょ
In Australia, New Zealand, and throughout the US and Canada. Some in Europe, mostly in the UK and the Scandinavian countries, coming back here in March and April
こういうのにいい山期間
to the south and the east.
ある
When I speak to audiences, I always watch people one by one because I never speak to the crowd. And I always listen to the entire audience because what I'm trying to manage when I'm speaking is to put everybody in the same place so that there's dead silence. Because if there's dead silence, that means that everybody's concentrating on the same thing and that everybody has come to a collective agreement that that thing is of substantive importance. And the most reliable means of silencing an audience of 2,500 people, regardless of where that is around the world, is to make a strong case for the relationship between
伝えられてるね結構
meaning and responsibility. And the case for suffering, I think, is quite obvious because one of the things that I point out to my listeners is that life has a tragic element. We all are perfectly aware of that. And that we're subject to that as fragile and finite creatures. And that tragic element is amplified by the human proclivity for malevolence at a psychological level and at a social level. And that's the reality that we find ourselves confronted with eternally in some sense. And that the proper antidote to that is not the pursuit of happiness, and it's not even the existence of the individual rights that are
代行してました
part of the substructure of democratic society, but the
Very good.
willingness to accept voluntary responsibility for those preconditions and then working to rectify them. And the corollary of that is that it's almost inevitably the case that people find the meaning that sustains themselves through suffering and that enables them to be motivated sufficiently to constrain their own malevolence is to be found in the adoption of responsibility.
おお負けた
And it's
あやばい
surprising
オスカーが
that a message that
あやばいよ
has that much
したら
weight, let's say, and that little
やばいオ
frivolity,
スカーやばいな
no frivolity,
Oh, yeah.
let's say, in that.
井上言ったんやお前無理やって言ったんや
Silence is peace.
あハラミ系もイスラム人じゃん
Can democracy survive? Well, first of all, if you ask
あほや本当
a
に
person in the democratic society whether they would
や
like
っ
it to
ぱり
survive, you're
来て
going
たや
to, the resounding answer to that is going to be yes.
ほや
The people who are working to
Oh, yeah,
undermine it are a tiny radical fringe on
Oh, yeah,
both ends of the
yeah.
political distribution, let's say, with a disproportionate amount of exposure and power.
じゃ
And the people in the middle are lost in some sense without a uniting narrative.
あと思ったや
A huge part of the narrative that has united democratic countries since their foundation isn't the doctrine of rights. And it's not the doctrine of individual happiness. It's the doctrine
ハ
that
ー
the
ピネスって
individual
俺
is the
アベノチャー
sovereign
ジブリガン政治
foundation
がなんでプリキャンなんだよさ
of the polity
こんなよ
and
マジかでこの件にはってなんだ
cosmos itself, which is something that I happen to believe, given
Masz
the
rację,
important
konkretnie.
role that consciousness plays in existence itself, and
水切っていって
that
やばいな水だ
useful
とね
and necessary to call to
こ
people
ういうかこいつ
to
は
remind them of
や
their
ばいシグマが今ね
responsibility as
あ
sovereign
あ
individuals,
もう知ってたよな
and so
あ
I'm encouraging
あ信玄ですああもう知ったよな
to
どうなったんじゃけんさ
adopt, to develop a vision for their life, to adopt full responsibility for themselves in a manner, and not in a manner that pertains specifically to their narrow self-interest or happiness, but to something that's much broader in scope.
デモク
To
ラ
think
デ
that
モクラ
each
デモク
person
リットデモクリットどうもザ
take
ワ
on the voluntary requirement to take care of themselves, but also their future self, because each of us is a collective that
フランス語っぽくなるまあええんやけど別にだって英語のさっき T と D だこれはいいのこれいいのだから場合によっては脱ぐんだったらね下にハンドハンド気づかなかった気づかなかった気づかなかった気づかなかった気づかなかったエレジオンただのエレジオンだね英語さ神病薬化現象という俺が説明した通りあれは斉藤敦美さんご説明したさすがにね山王大学と東京学芸大学の知ってますねあれやっていいんだ今孫ですねアンジェリーナ孫ですねマージェリンの孫ですねおいと義の孫義の息子だね
is somehow a center of reality itself, and that needs to be manifested in life itself, and that if it isn't manifested, then it's something of tremendous value is not brought forward,
右翼なんて一番怖いってあいつら危ないって言ったら危ないって言ったらあいつら危ないさ
to the degree that that's not brought forward, then something healthy needs to take its place.
いや痛いんです本当に
People understand this sort of thing a lot more clearly
いつ
than
ら
you
怖い
might
と
think,
立ちか
if
ね
you
び
explain
っ
it
くり
to
した
them, as if they might understand.
ガス子供
And then it
子供
gives them a series of purposes that
子供やった
straightens out their life. And
これ
so my sense is
ブロックシャーさん
the way that you revivify democracy is by remembering its fundamental
やっ
insistence
ぱ
that
り
the individual is at the cornerstone of the state, and then everything you can possibly do to fortify the individual.
言ってんのさ
Simultaneously,
人たち一斉に
the individual is the eyes of the state, is that
やるわけねえやろ西村そう
the living
こうしたい
individual
と
is
あらさいよさあらさいたんよびっくりしたさ
the living individual revivifies the state.
これ言ったよ
And to the degree that we forget our
あんたらやったらさあんたら
sovereignty of the individual, right? The divine sovereignty of the individual, for that matter,
上がやって
then
た
we undermine the foundation on
Okay.
which democracy is based.
上
And
田選
then
手がや
people
ってる
look for alternatives. They
あ
search
上
for
田選手ろ
meaning
やってみたこれ
elsewhere.
そういう
Extremist movements
わしに
of
や
one form
め
or
これ
another,
ろ
or
やってる
they
人だ
collapse into a kind of nihilism that's completely
知らない
counterproductive.
じゃね今ねもう離婚しようで検討者が
Well, so
さ
that's been my experience.
たまつらんか誰のニュースでさもうびっくりした岸も赤い色じゃないさみんな見るよ
Well,
顔見てさ
now it is the end of the Chatham meeting, which was a great meeting. We have had excellent discussions. We have learned a lot, and we have thought a lot. And now I hope to see you in Paris next June
大
in
学この祭りか
the
な
plenary
出し
session.
てエン
And
ドライトね
all of us, we shall be there. So
声
please do
見
come
え
to
ない
Paris.
調べたらみんな YouTube だ似てたはわなんか似てたびっくりした小松井香さんが勘違いでもなびっくりした日程固まるわかるこれもう
So this morning we had a session on
Yeah,
future
yeah,
mobility, and we actually discussed what does it
Well,
mean for the
you
auto
know,
industry and what does it mean
知ってるじゃん本当に
If
大
you
塚
look
や
at
っぱりな
the auto industry,
急
there has
な
never been as much
トライメ
change
と
as
大
there
津
is
やったわ
today.
昨日
Technology
やっぱ
side,
こいつは共謀してたもう
connectivity, electrification, autonomous
これ
driving,
ね辰巳君や草津はもう大丈夫や
sharing,
な
more
辰巳君
urbanization.
と無理だそうやっぱりだ
Also on the
難
regulation
しかった
side, where it's about emission
どういうことやって
control
言っ
standards,
た
and also
誰が許可しちゃう
regulation
だから
for
俺は
managing congestions
あ上等宮内庁に文句言ってんあんたら日本政府がやったのかってさやっちまったよ俺があんま
actually means
だよ
how will
Okay.
actually the traffic evolve if you have more AVs and
だあんたらがやったんじゃないさ
AVs? What would be levers to actually work on getting a mitigation on traffic and basically how to deal with heightened traffic from autonomous vehicles? What would be the impact of actually sharing more cars, smaller or maybe bus-based vehicles, and actually how would you deal with competitive pricing? How would you actually work as a city to make the whole mobility work and in the end get to a better transportation for the whole?
大体今回この前と今回ね奈良君とね 聞かないよ問題だ問題はいよ言えよ誰の許可で行った日本政府の命令かってそのお前この間上に行ったよ上に鍵あったよさ上に行ったよもう警察庁やつなのさあというかでもないよ上に黙りなしなの上にパスワード事件の時に俺さすがに知らない長浜市の職員に文句言ったらさ電話したらあんた態度悪いな本当に言うぞこれ上にさ言っとんだよどんなにつけたよやっぱりね困ってもだあんまり使いたくないあんまり全部ねうわった誰やと思った訴えられると思ったびっくりしたなそれはじゃん自立じゃないんじゃないそう次くんかやっぱりディープステートやっぱりね入れ東京だったもうどういうね本当にマスロビーで見るじゃん本当にもし本当に神田正輝さんも出て本当にびっくりした本当に神田正輝くんね出てびっくりした本当にびっくりした本当にそうそうがそう指揮してる要は逆にさ陰でさ活動し始めたよな分散体制やってやっぱり一部の会社員が揉めてるからやっぱ揉めてるからやっぱライブ文書の会社員結構多いってわけさ多いんややっぱりねやっぱり自民党も政選挙調査してるやっぱり調査してバカ小泉進次郎のあの票が12万票おかしいよだから20万票いくって言ったら比例合わせ比例加算されるって分かってるさあどういうことだと思ったらびっくりしたやっぱり辻、やっぱりあいつ100歳だからさ、木下の言った通りでさ、やっぱあれ、花がいない、長ない。
Strategic mission for Europe has to care on the globalized world. That means to stabilize our neighborship.
やっぱり大きくなりたいし、警察もこういうのさ、やっぱり出られない。あいつら日本政府、やっぱ税金で食ってたのもおかしいなと思ったんだけどさ、あえて。
European values as attractive as possible in the global competition. Which order is the better one?
びっくりした。小林さないは逆にさ、見えに来たんじゃないか。見えに来たんや。富田浩生さんの要請。来たんや。ガタガタ分裂してたわけや。
Some people wonder why best practices in government spread faster amongst the democracies. When you see
For example, New Zealand has solved the problem of public finance. Why doesn't everybody copy it? Why doesn't everybody copy the way that the South Koreans teach their kids mathematics? Why doesn't everybody copy the way the Swiss decentralize their politics?
だって最終的に光教科の指導を受けて多分演技下手くそだそう行きなさいね光教科さめっちゃすごいですねさ無事さ世界最初になってびっくりやないや青に入ったらそうちょっとやっぱりな青にブルースにやっぱりなマウスプロ光教科って大塚近尾さんがいたね
stress the need to look at best practice so that politicians and voters become more aware that there are solutions to most of the public policy problems. We just haven't tried them in many countries. On the other hand, I think there's one other side to this that one shouldn't forget. Sometimes you'll meet people who'll tell you, well, the Scandinavians have worked everything out, and Sweden or Finland or Denmark has come up with the perfect solution to policy problems. That's often an argument people make on the left in the United States. But I don't think the solutions that the Swedes came up with in recent decades necessarily work in a country as large and as diverse as the United States. So let's look at best practice. Let's understand which systems deliver the best results. But let's not pretend that one size is going to fit all. Part of the reason for the success of Western civilization, which is where democracy began, with the diversity of systems and the competition between them.
やっぱドラフもフォローしてんかいな。じいちゃんのこのね、バーリンのサイト、本物でした。気づかんかったら皆さん、本人。
I recently read that information is now the world's most consequential and contested geopolitical resource. I think that's right. Global internet penetration is revolutionized the information domain. Information operations, which aren't new, are dramatically expanding in scale and scope. This is a new challenge for media organizations, which are already facing a business model crisis and declining trust. Meanwhile, AI advances converge into those with access to lots of data. This has implications for privacy, but also for the information advantage that democracies traditionally enjoy.
報告したいけどこういう低いまあ元から将軍だったりさ戦場の官邸からね軍人だったりさ
Well, does diplomacy, European diplomacy exist?
そうだアメリカ軍人はねアメリカ
Easy question, and the answer is
捜査協力してるよあらゆる
yes and no.
それが証拠にね思う FBI 捜査来たからね
Institutional sense, that is, Mrs. Mogherini today exists. She travels, she can deliver some messages for Europe, but I would say certainly not on the most fundamental issues of foreign policy, because the members of the European Union are, many of them, very old nation states. They have their own policy, defense, security apparatus, and so forth and so on.
俺よりか学部俺緊張してまうわ本人来たら
The French
ビビるわ
diplomacy
ビビるってよ
has to be second to the European diplomacy, and the same with the UK, as long as the UK is in the EU or the German diplomacy, and I could continue the list. So, in my judgment, the best merit of the EU
グリーン
diplomacy
ゲームは初めて
is first to perhaps reduce as much as possible the differences between the various diplomacies of the member states.
誰と入院したトマスはああ映画さ入籍して
And also, I think the EU diplomacy can deal with some relatively secondary issues, such as, for instance, I'm thinking of the Timor case in Indonesia, that is issues which are not at the forefront of national diplomacies, but which nevertheless can have some importance. So, to conclude, I would say that the real European diplomacy will exist only
通知が来る来ます
when
よ
the Europeans have a clear understanding
あ あとね向こうも訴える
what
け
they
ど
want
さ
to achieve,
詐欺だって訴えるわ
what
けだよ
is the
冒涜したことで
identity of the European Union still to be built, because diplomacy, like defense, has to do with the protecting the identity of a political unit. And I think we have not yet reached the stage when we are able to answer this question: what is our identity, and what is it exactly that we want to protect?
欧州はさあ冒涜解将軍のお孫さんが冒涜解将軍ヒーローとかさマッカーサーと5軍ぶつかったわけですよ
They're certainly similar in one respect. Thucydides wrote about brilliantly in his book on the Peloponnesian War. That when a rising power, as Thucydides wrote about Athens, threatens to displace a ruling power like Sparta, or in the current situation, a rising China threatens to displace a ruling U.S., alarm bells should sound, grave danger ahead, a significant likelihood of war, real bloody war.
なんか実感あったら暗いよ
I think China's rise will change the international configuration from the unipolar to bipolar, and also possibly and make the world order and different from before. But it doesn't mean that the China's rise is the only factor to change the current international order. And actually, the Chinese policy is more challenging than China's rise to the current international order. Because China's policy tries to maintain the order, the reason is very obvious. China benefits from the present order, and meanwhile, the Trump administration believe, and China benefits more from the current order than the United States. That's why they want to change the order, and based on the ideology of anti-establishment. So from my understanding, if we're talking about one ideology and challenging the current international order or the liberalist order, is the anti-establishmentism in the US and the populism in the Euro.
なんか長くのなんかアホかって言ったら最後月
I think in economic terms, it's already shaping up to be the Chinese century. By 2014, according to the IMF, China was the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity, and in other respects, China is already the world's largest manufacturer, the world's largest exporter, the world's largest market for a great many important commodities such as vehicles. The question is whether that economic power translates into political power and strategic power, because I think most people would agree, probably even in Beijing, that America remains the world's dominant political power. And the question is, will that economic mismatch between economic power and strategic power change, and China will become the dominant power, not just economically, but politically? It's too soon to tell that, however, on that, because there are a lot of different variables. Will there be a direct conflict between China and the US, for example, over the dominance of the Pacific? Will China perhaps be constrained by other things? Maybe there'll be internal disruption to China's politics if it cannot manage to, for example, maintain current political stability. That could disrupt China's political rise. And finally, there's the question of the rest of the world, because between them, China and the US are not the whole world economy. Other major powers will have a say in this. And at the moment, it looks like most of the other major powers of the world, Japan, the European Union, are closer to the United States than to China. So there's a question whether China, even as the world's largest economy, can become the dominant political power without allies.
びっくりしたね
I think economic growth, the success or failure of it will be determined
by the degree to which individual countries and regions can supply jobs for the great emerging middle classes of these countries, formerly poor countries. I think what we're likely to see in the 21st century is many people who are either liberated from hard labor or for whom there is too little hard labor to provide jobs. And what will these people do? How will they be employed? And I think that will be a major factor contributing forward. Also, even though the world population is declining, we're still in an era of massive male youth bulges in about 20 or 30 countries. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to provide jobs for people, whether it's in China, in Yemen, it's in Ethiopia, or wherever.
はい。英語っぽいから絡み切ってる。なんかめっちゃ日本にわからんからね、そう。知ってた。
The main question of my talk is if robotics and artificial intelligence and the upcoming industrial revolution are a threat or an opportunity for the world and for manufacturing countries and also for developing countries. And the answer is still unknown. But what is sure now is that we have to invest in the main assets that are characterizing the industrial revolution, the digital transformation, competences, infrastructures, data centers, and all the tools that are fundamental and are considered enabling technologies for the future digital transformation. I also presented the differences between the US, Europe, and China, how they are integrating artificial intelligence into different knowledge and competences and scientific results. For example, in the US, they are investing very much in developing artificial intelligence for humanities. While in China, they are investing in developing artificial intelligence for agricultural application, for producing food, for example. So globalization has obtained some results in terms of being socially connected, but in terms of geopolitics, we still see many differences also in how the digital transformation is implemented in the society. Then I spoke about robotics and how the journey of robotics is coming into us, because robotics was developed for manufacturing countries for industrial production, and robots are in manufacturing plants. But in recent years, what we have seen is the development of service robotics, which is intended to support services and they offer services in terms of medical robotics, educational robotics. And now what is happening is that robotics is coming into our houses by producing some consumer products and also producing changes in the society in terms of supporting autonomous drive or different products that are revolutionizing business and revolutionizing our lives.
俺が反応したくなったな。だからみんなですね、彼めっちゃ綺麗んじゃないかさ。ちょっとセンスを
We do have a very serious problem of people left behind. The global agenda talks about eradicating hunger, having every child in primary and secondary education. We're on track to achieve these things. And that means not just a few people left behind, it means literally hundreds of millions of people missing out. Take education. More than 250 million children, adolescents and youth not in school as we speak. How can those children and youth of the future really contribute to a knowledge economy if denied the most basic access to education? So it is time for the international community to get a grip on the reality of what is happening. If we want a world that's well fed, where people don't live in extreme poverty, where education is a right, not a privilege,
we have a lot to do. International development assistance is important, critical for the lowest income countries. For other countries to be prioritising their budget so that their growth is inclusive and sustainable is critical. There are solutions. What's needed is the political will to activate and implement those solutions.
地上最強敵で
There are more than 70 million people in the world that are forcibly displaced from their homes, either as refugees crossing borders or displaced in their own country because of war, violence, discrimination, persecution, bad governance. Why is that? The world has become a difficult place where to make peace. We have become unable to make peace and to build peace. So that's the first thing that we need to look at if we want to reduce this global refugee crisis. Meanwhile, what is very important to remember is that 85% of those 70 million people are not in the rich world. They are in poor countries or middle-income countries. So the effort, and the new effort, not just humanitarian, but medium, long-term effort, founded on sound development, both for refugees and for host communities, has to focus on those countries. We have now a global compact on refugees. We will have the first ever global refugee forum in December this year in Geneva. These are opportunity to rally broader coalitions of actors, not just states and the United Nations, but also the private sector, the business community, civil society, academia, to forge new ways to respond to the global refugee crisis and to finally address strategically its root causes. The question that you're raising, will Syria find a long-lasting peace? Well, the Syrian people deserve a long-lasting peace. Think about it. I mean, 8 years now in a horrible conflict which became from local, regional, and frankly international. So the answer is, it must be yes. Now, how to do it is where the challenge is coming. And the only way to do it is actually to end the military conflict, because there is no solution. I mean, it's not just a word, it's the truth. There will never be just a military solution. And include everyone. New constitution, elections under the UN supervision, that would be a way to include them.
Well, I'm delighted to be able tonight to address the members of the trilaterals and their guests. And I think my focus will be tonight on three things. One is, multilateralism has been the bread and butter of many of us, certainly at the IMF, and we believe that it has been critical in order to address many of the potential disorders of the world. Multilateralism is under threat at the moment, and I think that we have to make every effort to rejuvenate it, adapt it, and make sure that it continues to help govern, particularly the economic developments around the world. That's message number one. My second message will have to do with the much more longer-term consequences of short-term policies and mechanisms, and that is really the consequences of climate change. I believe that many of the issues that we're debating at the moment will mean absolutely nothing in 20 years' time if we have not acted now in order to make sure that the planet remains something that is hospitable for our children and grandchildren. And my third message, which will not surprise any of those who know me or my friends, will have to do with inequality, and in particular the inequality that women have to suffer and have had to suffer for a long time. And while inequality as such is a major disruption, I believe that by addressing women's situation and the inequality that they face, it will help quite a way in reducing inequalities. So we'll try to do that tonight.
We're living through an era of rapid and disruptive change. That's across the board, economy, society, and what we're seeing is that nowhere is that disruption more evident than the trends associated with climate change. We're all familiar with the extreme events, the temperature rises, and the inexorable change that we're seeing throughout the planet's ecology as a result of climate change. But a major part of that discussion is how does energy transition, decarbonization of our energy system, which accounts for about 2/3 of carbon emissions, how will that impact climate change, and can we enter an energy transition era rapidly enough to mitigate carbon that will take us to a safe future? This is already happening. Renewable energy today is cost competitive on the grid. In a few years, renewable energy has reached 33% of capacity of global power generation. It's the fastest growing segment, and costs are decreasing rapidly. So what we're going to see is a rapid movement towards energy transition that's also going to be disruptive for the business models of today. It's going to imply new geostrategic relationships among countries as countries move away from resource-dependent fossil fuel-based systems into clean energy systems, and the resource is going to become technology, and technology innovation is going to decide the winners and losers in this race.
そんなにちょっとだけ言ってないですよ。もうちょっと宣伝してっていうかこの最適やな。
The low carbon economy should come because to avoid the climate change, serious effort is necessary. Many of the governments are trying the new technologies, new regulations, new rules to move to that direction. But the IEA, International Energy Agency, assessed the current effort is not enough. We need much more efforts to introduce new technologies about renewables or carbon-related technologies, efficiency in a difficult sector, in the industry, and new regulations. So we need really double or triple our efforts to make it happen. One of the areas which IEA focused on is hydrogen. Hydrogen can be used to store the electricity generated by wind or solar, which is very volatile, and storage is the key element. So battery may not necessarily be enough, so hydrogen can be used. And also hydrogen can be used for steel, cement, some of the industries where the decarbonization is very difficult. So that's another area. The third one will be the hydrogen could be the new transformation for the sectors of the oil or gas producing country. If they can remove carbon dioxide from oil or gas or coal, then these hydrocarbon change into the very friendly, climate-friendly resources. So this may prevent the hydrocarbon as a stranded asset. So maybe the hydrogen is one of the key areas. We need lots of infrastructure building, technologies are necessary, but hydrogen may give us a good chance to achieve the sustainable future.
The challenge of dealing with disinformation narrative is that it's not enough just to check the facts, because by definition, any disinformation narrative doesn't have good facts. They make their facts up. They're actually lying. This is why it's disinformation. So the challenge with disinformation actors is that the thing they have in common is they're really good storytellers. They tell a story that people want to believe. A lot of the time they will appeal to anger, they'll appeal to fear, they'll appeal to hatred, and they will try and stop people thinking. They'll try and get people so enraged that they switch off their critical faculty. That means that for those of us who are trying to challenge these narratives on a daily basis, it's a much more complex challenge than just presenting the facts. You have to have the ability to tell the story, and you have to find an emotion to appeal to, which will actually get people to think. Now, fortunately, there is a model of story which works. If you think of the detective story, that's a story where you're putting together evidence and you're telling people this is what happened, this is why it happened, and it appeals to a different sort of emotion. It appeals to curiosity. It appeals to problem solving, and so a lot of the challenge of dealing with disinformation is presenting the story of how the disinformation was created, how was the trick done, and you can lead people on the story and you can show them this person is telling you that here is a video of somebody attacking a voter at a polling station yesterday, but actually look, this video showed up on CNN 4 years ago in a different context. You can share that voyage of discovery with the person you're talking with, and then they will realize how the trick was done, but it will also sensitize them that the next time around they'll be looking for that same trick. If you teach people very simple skills like searching for a photo online or searching for a video online, you can actually make them proof against that kind of reused content and repackaged content, not just today, but every time this kind of thing comes up. And so really dealing with disinformation, you have to have the facts, but you have to teach the skills as well. You have to give people the ability to solve the problems for themselves, because then you'll be appealing to their curiosity, you'll be appealing to their problem-solving senses, and you'll be appealing to their sense of pride in actually expressing the story in the first place. And those things will then counter the anger and the fear and the hatred that disinformation
何を言ったんよさあ何を言ったって言ったまさかお前ら受験ねお前ら何さんたちこれのタッキーな
Cities are one of the greatest innovations of all time. And what's interesting right now is that urbanization is, alongside with